Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we bring you a very important and urgent discussion that is shaking the entire world. Reports are flooding in about a massive escalation between the United States, Israel, and Iran. The situation is being described as nothing short of explosive, with many analysts warning that the Middle East could once again become the epicenter of global conflict. And in this video, we will dive deep into the reality behind the headlines, including insights from one of the most outspoken American economists and public intellectuals, Professor Richard D. Wolff, who has boldly shared his perspective on the truth behind these events. So stay with us as we break this down, the military actions, the political strategies, and most importantly, the hidden economic forces driving this confrontation. The latest reports suggest that U.S. forces, in coordination with Israeli military units, have carried out direct attacks on Iranian positions. While official statements from Washington describe the strikes as defensive and necessary to protect U.S. and Israeli security interests, Tehran has slammed the actions as outright aggression and a declaration of war. Iranian state media claims multiple military facilities were targeted, with casualties reported. What makes this conflict especially dangerous is that Iran is not a weak or isolated country. It has significant military capabilities, regional allies, and a large population determined to resist foreign interference. Already, Hezbollah in Lebanon and militias in Iraq have issued warnings that they will retaliate against U.S. and Israeli interests if the strikes continue. This is not the first time tensions have spiked between these nations. For decades, the U.S. and Israel have viewed Iran as a threat, whether because of its nuclear program, its support for regional groups opposed to Israeli policies, or its independent stance against Western dominance. But this latest round of violence appears different. It feels less like isolated skirmishes and more like the opening stages of a broader war. Now, let's turn to Professor Richard D. Wolff's perspective. For those who don't know him, Professor Wolff is a renowned American economist, author, and critic of U.S. foreign policy. He has often highlighted how wars are not simply about ideology or defense. They're about economics, profits, and power. And in his latest comments, Wolff makes it clear, the U.S. attack on Iran is not just a military operation, it is an economic strategy. According to Wolff, the American ruling class, politicians, corporate elites, and the military-industrial complex has long understood that controlling the Middle East is crucial for global dominance. Iran, sitting on massive reserves of oil and gas, represents both an opportunity and a threat. If Iran sells its resources independently, especially to rising powers like China, it undermines U.S. control over global energy markets. But if Iran can be destabilized, weakened, or forced into submission, American corporations and allies stand to profit enormously. Wolff argues that this conflict cannot be separated from the broader competition between the U.S. and China. The Biden administration, just like Trump before him, is determined to prevent China from building alliances that bypass U.S. influence. Iran, with its strategic partnership with Beijing, is a critical piece of that puzzle. By attacking Iran, Washington is sending a message not just to Tehran, but to the entire world. Resist U.S. dominance at your own peril. But what about Israel's role in all this? For decades, Israel has lobbied Washington to take a harder line against Iran. Tel Aviv sees Tehran as its main regional rival, accusing it of funding groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. For Israeli leaders, striking Iran is not only about security, but about maintaining regional supremacy. Many analysts believe the recent attacks were coordinated specifically to weaken Iran's nuclear facilities and military infrastructure before they could pose an even greater challenge. But Wolff's point is that Israel's motivations dovetail perfectly with U.S. economic interests. By framing Iran as a threat to democracy or a terror sponsor, Western governments justify military actions that are, in reality, deeply tied to maintaining their own global influence. Let's step back for a moment and think about the human cost. The people who suffer most in these conflicts are not the politicians, not the generals, not the CEOs of weapons companies. It is ordinary men, women, and children in Iran, in Israel, and across the region who bear the brunt of bombs, sanctions, and instability. Already, videos from Tehran show frightened civilians rushing to shelters. Hospitals are overwhelmed, and Iranian officials warn of humanitarian consequences if attacks escalate. Professor Wolff emphasizes this point strongly. He argues that the working classes in Iran, in America, in Israel, and everywhere else are victims of a system where the powerful use war as a tool to protect their wealth and authority. While defense contractors like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman see their stock prices soar, ordinary people pay with their lives and livelihoods. And this brings us to the deeper question, why now? Why is this attack happening at this particular moment? The answer may lie in a combination of political and economic crises at home. The U.S. economy is facing inflation, inequality, and rising dissatisfaction among workers. In Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is under immense pressure from domestic protests and political challenges. For both governments, escalating a foreign conflict can serve as a distraction and a unifying tool. Nothing rallies a divided population faster than the drumbeat of war. Wolff suggests that these attacks are part of a classic playbook. When internal problems become overwhelming, leaders manufacture an external enemy. The media then amplifies the message, portraying the war as necessary, even heroic, while the underlying motives remain hidden. Now, let's consider the global reactions. Russia and China have already condemned the attacks. Moscow has warned that further escalation could trigger uncontrollable consequences, while Beijing has called for restraint and dialogue. Meanwhile, European leaders are divided. Some, like the UK, back Washington's moves, while others worry that another Middle Eastern war could unleash new refugee waves and energy crises. This division is crucial. If the U.S. and Israel continue down this path, it risks creating a global split reminiscent of the Cold War, one bloc led by Washington, the other by Beijing and Moscow. Iran, positioned at the heart of Eurasia, may become the front line of this new global contest. So where does this leave us? Professor Wolff's bold truth is clear. What we are witnessing is not just a clash of armies, but a clash of systems. On one side, the U.S. and Israel, backed by powerful corporate and political interests, determined to maintain global dominance. On the other, Iran and its allies, seeking independence and alternative alliances in a rapidly changing world order. The battlefield may be in the Middle East, but the stakes are global. For ordinary people, the lesson is sobering. If history has taught us anything, it is that wars fought for power and profit rarely bring security or prosperity to the masses. Instead, they bring destruction, division, and decades of instability. Friends, this conflict is still unfolding, and the situation could change rapidly in the coming days. Will the U.S. and Israel push for a full-scale war? Will Iran strike back in a way that drags the entire region into chaos? Or will cooler heads prevail, finding a path to negotiation before it's too late? As always, we will continue monitoring developments closely and bringing you the analysis that mainstream media often ignores. Before we end, let's leave you with Professor Wolff's central warning. The real danger is not Iran. The real danger is a system where the interests of the few dictate the suffering of the many. Unless we challenge that system, wars like this will keep happening again and again.